Hey,
Got it.
Eva Anglophobe.
Angofra.
Is that it? Anglophone.
Angofra, like the tree.
Angophora. I'm just
Thanks
messing
for
with you.
thanks for coming on, Tyson. It's great to chat with you. Last time we
Yeah.
saw you, you were getting massaged by our friend Clay up at Laura Festival.
Yeah. For my troublesome lower back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just
How-
had like an injection into my spine.
Wow.
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, that's helping a bit.
Yeah, that's
Mm,
good. That's
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
So what's been happening for you since then?
Well, the old fellas did smoke my son with yuk yonk,
Hmm.
and he's like that seems to have helped him,
Wow.
but they were like calling out straight after, like, oh, we forgot to do his ears. Do his ears, do his ears. Or
Oh,
so like I had to do his ears. And it's like, well, I could have just smoked him all myself in the first place. So,
yeah.
I guess I don't know. Maybe that's just I don't know. Maybe it's all just a huge grift, and that's just like we'll see, we missed the ears kind of thing if it doesn't work
Right.
out. But you know what? It is working out pretty good. He's growing pretty fast. He's still
That's
going to introduce. He's going to interrupt us probably during this.
yeah, that's
I've
good.
just given him something that he obsesses over that I keep away from him.
Yeah.
Usually, but I just gave him that to keep him busy. But
If
you're going to hear him like just going bah every now and then.
Yeah, that's right. It's keeping it
Mm.
real. I've got my niece out there as well, so she might come and
Yeah.
say random words and run through the
Okay.
hallway.
Is that just because she's a kid or because she's neurodivergent?
Probably just because she's a kid, but
Right. Hmm.
yeah.
Well, this little fella, neurodivergent as hell. All the
Yeah.
autism. And yeah, so it's like it's a bit of a struggle. I know we're supposed to be all grateful for the gift of neurodivergence and everything, but
Makes
it's
things hard.
yeah. I don't know. When you're cleaning like caca off the floor for the sixth time that
Yeah.
day, and and the walls, excellent. It's like, hey, thank you for the gift, but
Yeah.
also probably some sort of, I don't know, policies of the feces would be good.
Yeah. And in this modern setting as well, it doesn't make it easy to
Yeah.
navigate things like that. You don't have a whole tribe around you helping you,
Mm,
and being outside where it's a lot more supportive of that kind of
that's
brain.
it. That's it. And I guess this business that we're all involved with is just trying to figure out what comes next and how to manage and
Right.
co-create the systems that we'll need, going forward, that are based not on how we'd like reality to be, but what the reality is,
Yeah.
you know.
Yes.
And that's just it. So there are quite a few realities. There's the reality that of the world
Mm.
and what the world as a being is doing, and the things that it's going to be throwing up climate wise and every other wise,
Hmm.
and what it's doing right now with that. And then there's also the reality of the denial of that and all the trouble that's creating, and then all the wrong story, like disinformation, which is a force multiplier in that, which
Mm.
will do things like polluting the homeschooling networks that you might work with, and I don't know what we call ferals. I don't know what you call them.
Rewilders.
Yeah, rewilders who you're mixing with, working with, playing with, trying to co-create with,
Yeah.
all over the shop. There's a lot of wrong story, disinformation that weirdly has a lot of extremely right-wing stuff in it, a lot of eugenic stuff in it, a lot of especially libertarian stuff to it.
Mm.
There's always been like not a very big division between your permaculture regenerative systems sort of community and your log cabin sort of
Yes.
guys in the US.
Yeah. Off
Second
grid.
Second Amendment, off grid, you know, not just log cabin individual, but if it's communities, it's a compound and it's a militia, and You know, I know those guys really well because a lot of them read my work.
Yeah.
And send me emails going, thanks. You know, we have implemented an Australian Indigenous governance system in our compound to keep our bitch women under control so they won't escape over the walls, you know. And so we're really grateful to you to that for your savage, paleo governance model that we've implemented here. And I just, I don't know, I just weep a little bit and and then think about what are the consequences of sharing knowledge in the world without being able to regulate the way it's used.
That's
Which
right.
I think arguably is the whole problem with industrial modernity in the first place, is people propagating knowledge and innovations without making sure there are accompanying social technologies that can act as negative feedback loops or regulatory feedback loops against these engines of eternal growth that just seem to come out of any gain in efficiency that
Right.
humans
Because
make in their living systems.
because it's like applying that information. It needs to be in the right context, right?
That's
So it
him.
needs to be in that right relationship, not taking threads out of a culture and then implementing it with your own filter system and going
That's
through
it.
it can be really dangerous. And that would be
Yeah.
pretty intense for you, having written Sand Talk and then having, so many people from so many different niche little communities coming at you with some interesting perspectives probably going on.
Oh my God, yes. Ah, man, I tell you. Man, we've got a missing family member at the moment. Like, been missing out bush for like 2 weeks.
Whoa.
Yeah, and they've called off the search and everything, and now it's just, so local blackfellas all getting together and doing ceremony now to, try call him home, whatever that means now. You don't know what that means yet.
Wow.
There's still hope that he's alive, but yeah, so we're in that position, and we put out a call. I did it through LinkedIn because I don't do any social media. I do like, LinkedIn as a sort of professional platform kind of thing, like just for posting about my work. That's my only engagement with the internet, and I never read the comments. But I put a call out on LinkedIn to all my Indigenous friends and colleagues who know how to work ceremony. Put that out, like internationally, anybody who can work, who knows how to work the smoke and, can send, protection and whatever, help bring him home. Yeah, we called out for that because that's what the family asked me to do. So did that. And then the family points out that they have been reading the comments section and, yeah, just the presence of comments from non-Indigenous people who basically just want to write an essay about how offended they are and how they feel excluded from that, and
Wow.
and that they're light workers, and that they're shamans as well, and but they're not going to help because they're pissed off because we just asked for Indigenous people and we excluded them. And nah.
It's kind of missing the whole point, really.
I don't know. Like I just like I'm not one of these ones who like screams about privilege all the time, but it's pretty hard to call that anything else.
Totally.
The amount of privilege that it would take to make that situation all about you.
Yeah.
And like how hurt you are. Anyway, it was great because it did cheered us up a bit and gave us all something to laugh about, which is good.
Either laugh or cry in that situation.
Yeah. Yep, that's it.
And that's the thing though. That's kind of what we are facing as a culture. And it's like, is there an answer of how to bring those kind of thought patterns back down into the ground and back into a grounded reality rooted in actual reality rather than kind of pseudo spiritual inflated ego kind of up in the air kind of thing. That's a huge thing right now.
I think the answer lies in our carer responsibilities.
Yeah.
Our responsibilities as carers, and what we learn, and what is the freaking purpose? What is the purpose, our evolutionary purpose as human beings, for being driven to care for those who are, less able in any way?
Yeah.
And we've been doing this forever, and it's not like just a people of color thing, like fucking Neanderthals. There are, like, 50-year-old skeletal remains of Neanderthals who were disabled in childhood and have been obviously carried everywhere and cared for decades and decades and decades. This is something that we do. Supposedly, Neanderthals were brutish and had tiny, short lives where they didn't survive past 15, the age of 15 or something, and that they all just had a horrible time and died getting trampled by mammoths and eaten by saber-toothed tigers. But this is a cartoon view of reality.
That's a wrong story.
I think, the right story is about care. And then I guess the answers that we're looking for, everything lies, I believe, in exploring that.
Yes.
What do you know about yourself as a being in relation? What do you know about yourself until you've had to wipe the ass of a relative who's incapable of doing that?
Right. That's everything.
And then faced the reality that one day someone's going to have to wipe your ass. Like, unless you die in a horrendous accident or something, and like die instantly. And then someone's going to have to clean up your shit covered corpse then too, because someday someone's going to be wiping your ass.
Yeah. And if you're lucky, it will be your family members, not some strangers that are nursing home.
Or it'll be someone who's paid to do it. But one way or another, what is the system in which you want to wipe and be wiped?
Yeah.
What does it do? This caring and being driven to care, it kicks your heart into a different gear. You find a new gear as a human being. You find super capacities. But that's just as an individual. What does it do for you as a group? What is the evolutionary purpose as a group? What it does is it teaches you to be adaptive. It teaches you to understand that you value everything about a system, and not just about what it has immediate utility, because every part of a system, surprise, surprise, does amazing things for the rest of it. We talk a lot about, evolution producing heaps of junk DNA, and we talk about, look, for example, at the useless appendix. What's the appendix for? It's useless. I mean, but no, it's pretty important. The appendix, you just don't know just yet what it's for. But it's turned out to be fairly important as they kept looking. Everything's important. And I don't know. So I believe that's something we could explore. Is like, I feel it really strongly that that's the answer, and that's the thing.
Because essentially,
carers, it's what we do with and for our neurodivergent, for our disabled. And it's the ways that we modify our lifestyles around them and make our societies accessible, to people, so they can be as independent as possible and have as much agency and dignity as possible. That is how you create a sustainable, community. You design your community, around your outliers. Right? You make sure that everybody can fit, and then weirdly, that's where your mutations come from. It's from the outliers. So the mutation of your community in its development, for how the hell do we turn this sedentary community into a seasonally mobile community as the superstorms and floods and everything else come? How do we make a mobile community? Well, evolving towards that may entail a few modifications that you would never have come up with unless you were trying to figure out how do you help the guy with no arms and legs get around your town? How do you figure out how you're going to let a 6-year-old autistic kid who's a flight risk, who will run off into the bush and die, how do you allow them, full access to the community and freedom to free range from a play like any other kid?
Yeah.
These are the solutions that you look for in designing a community, that actually they're the stuff from left field that helps produce the mutations and innovations that allow your community to evolve in ways that are more adaptive and, etc. Now you'll see what I did make a bit of a false equivalence there. Like I made like mutations that are unexpected help you to produce innovations for the unexpected. That's an assumption. Just because the idea of the unexpected exists in both of those things doesn't mean they dovetail neatly together. That's just something I'm exploring right now. And I can tell you how I'm exploring it and where that's going in my writing and all that kind of thing, if you like. And
yeah, please do.
as we go along. But anyway, we need to break this up a bit because I've been talking for like 5 minutes now.
No, it's great. I just wanted to say on that, I remember hearing about an archaeology discovery down near Lake Mungo. It's like down out west from me, and they found the petrified footprints, but there was just one left-hand footprint running like as fast as the two-footed folks, but then there was this stub, and it was actually like a stick as his leg. And so that proved, I think it was over 10,000 years ago, that proved that mob was doing, surgery and
prosthetics.
Yeah, that's just incredible.
And that a one-legged dude could run as fast as everyone else.
Yes, right. Isn't that just amazing?
That is really something.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know. The where that goes though is to this sort of idea of it just goes to this. So here's the thing. That's a true fact. But then what's the story that emerges from that? What's the story about care, accessibility, all these sorts of things? Is that the story that emerges? What's the story about, technology? What's the story about all these things? There are, arguably right stories, helpful stories that would emerge from that fact of that discovery. But what is the story that you've heard attached to that? That when people tell that story and go, wow, what is it in the context of usually? And what is the story that's attached to it? Is it a story of biological human development? Is it part of an idea of so human being, the Aboriginal people, human beings frozen in time, and so back then we see what it is to like a human being who is closer to being an animal, has the remarkable strength and fortitude to be able to run 30 kilometers an hour with one leg. Wow, isn't that amazing? What an amazing physical specimen of an example of his species. These are the things come through. And even as Aboriginal people, when we talk about our pride in that, we're proud because we can run good. This idea that we're somehow genetically more predisposed to be able to run or something like that. And I don't know, there's various facts that you can point out and as true in there that you can isolate and cherry pick to fit some kind of narrative. But the narrative, your reason for picking out those facts in the first place, the narrative always leads you to a bad place. It always leads you to a place where you are valorizing an in-group and demonizing an out-group, and then creating some very dangerous identities based on that always lead to the fascist turn, and always lead to murders, lots and lots of murders. So there's right story and there's wrong story. Mungo, there's right story for that, or there's wrong story for that. How are you going to do it? Sometimes your right story is not true, but it's still right because it's the narrative that pulls together all of the knowledge and relationships that are needed, to respond properly in a system. And that's what myth is, what people call myth. Myth is just right story that is not based on verifiable facts.
Mm.
But it's still right. Yeah. Wrong story that's not based on verifiable facts. That's just like, I don't know. That's just how I end up hating Hillary Clinton without really intending to. It's just a whole heap of Russian disinformation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And inherent misogyny.
Yeah.
So where do we end up?
I guess we end up trying to figure out, where the narratives are leading, what they're creating in our local relationships, in our local communities.
It's the outliers, and being grateful to having those outliers in your community. So, what do I know about myself, and what am I inventing, discovering? Now with the various new neurodivergences in my house right now. What do I learn from, the way I have to change and move my life all around for somebody who can't use a toilet yet and who's stronger than a pit bull and fights me when I change his nappy. And I'm the only one who can change the nappy. So that means I can't really travel, et cetera, et cetera. What do I learn from that? What do we learn in our house for the systems that we have to set up, for everybody here? What do I then learn from my own mental illness, that bipolar disorder, affective disorder, and my medications that I take there? How does that change my relation to Western medicine, to Western science, all these things, to become dependent on that medicine and to start to realize that, hey, well, bush medicine's great, but it only works in the bush if you're living in the bush.
Right.
If you want to treat the diseases of civilization, then you need the medicines of civilization. If you want to live in that civilization. And do you even have any fucking choice anymore? No.
That's right.
I know I don't. So, what are all these things? What do we learn in our house here? What do we learn from all these little neurodivergencies and outliers and things like that? So, I do a lot of mad studies methodologies. If you ever come across that discipline, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I've been really getting into that lately. So if you combine that with indigenous methodologies, it's there's some interesting stuff that you find as you're trying to story your way through this, and you're responding to, you're in that dialogue with the land always, but it's a collective dialogue, so it's not really dialogue like two people. It's collective with all your human and non-human kin, and you're embedded, and you're just, those informatics are constantly flowing through you, what's relevant for your time and place. And so you're in there and you're responding all the time, and you're, collectively making predictions and all these sorts of things. And so, storying the future around that. So we've been lately looking at this idea of dwarfism. Because when we dig into the old lore, the old lore about really fucking big megafauna, all the old lore ways about that. Usually those stories are about killing that megafauna and cutting it up into many smaller versions of itself, but also different species. So there's a lot of diversity, and it's smaller. So there's this, thing there. It's in the lore like that myth story, what they call, but we call it lore. But then it's also in the geological record. We know that 10 to 13,000 years ago, sea levels rose, shit dried out here, got hotter and drier across the continent on the whole. Yes, some places got, what about over here? It got wetter and greener over here. Yeah, all right, thanks, man. Yeah, on the whole, the continent dried out.
Yeah.
And now whether we assisted or not, in our role as custodians and all that sort of thing, the megafauna obviously had to go, and it had to be replaced with you know, the new megafauna had to be very diverse and had to be not much bigger than us,
right,
in order for it to be manageable, you know. So, you know, emus and kangaroos about as big as it gets.
Yeah.
So that's the new megafauna, you know, and everything's got to change, you know, and your biodiversity increases because so they take up a lot more ecological niches than just like diprotodons kind of thing. And yeah, and fire also had to be deployed to replace a lot of the functions of diprotodons, for example. Anyway, so these are the responses, the evolutionary responses of our communities.
Cycle.
Our community design, it has to be in sync with the land, and it has to mutate, you know, according to all of that. You know, and this included, you know, our roles as carers, you know, as a lot of things inspire this, you know, like if you keep getting kids who are, I don't know. Anyway,
do you think
that's going off too much on a tangent? So basically, when it comes to dwarfism, I think with this next cycle now, over the next couple of decades, of the continent will dry out more, and it will become hotter. So our prediction there, our assumption, would be, you know, based on the current bloody, you know, 10,000-year trend, would be that things will shrink down more. Wow. And we see this also with, you know, so fish, the dwarfism is a thing that's happening with fish because of size limits. You know, the fish are selecting evolutionarily for smaller sizes on traditionally much bigger fish.
Wow.
So they make sure that they're being born, you know, more fish are being born under the size limit for what you're allowed to catch, et cetera, et cetera. So dwarfism is a thing that happens really quickly in response to, you know, systemic pressures, you know, evolutionary pressures.
And do you think
that's we're going with that?
And that's a natural cycle, or humans are helping speed that cycle up right now?
Well, obviously they are.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that's all the evidence. And there's there's plenty of wrong story that can cherry pick a few right facts.
Yeah.
Make it seem otherwise. I can remember late 80s, early 90s, as a school teacher trying to teach about the greenhouse effect, and then being told that I wasn't allowed to teach about that anymore.
Wow.
Because there were complaints. You know, I recall the facts that were presented to me then. I recall the you know, people handing me books. This is your Christmas present. You know, here's your Secret Santa. It's a book called Cool It. You know, that's all about, you know, it's, you know, a climate change denial book, basically. Cool It. Lovely. And, you know, just lots of examples of, you know, polar bears that froze to death. Look at this. This polar bear froze to death, and you're telling me the planet's getting hot. Just, it's like, dude, you know, we all know why that's fucked. So let's just not even talk about it. They can talk about that over there. We've got other things to talk about over here. So anyway, that's fine. Off you go. That's some wrong story shit right there. So I mean, what we're looking for is the future right story. You know, what are the cautionary tales, you know, going forward for us to be able to avoid, you know, the situations. Like you look at our dreaming stories, it's full of people like that and how to deal with them. You know, most human lore cautionary tales, and especially Aboriginal dreaming stories, are about how to deal with assholes.
Right.
And how to adapt to a changing environment. Both of these things are existential threats.
Yes.
Human beings who are assholes, and a changing environment, and the inability to adapt to that changing environment. They're your existential threats, and they're tied together. You're unable to adapt to a changing environment because of assholes, usually, who seek power within the status quo and don't want it to change. So whether they have power or not, they're still seeking power, you know, within things as they are. So that's why they don't want it to change. So they'll do anything they'll murder their children,
Right.
you know, in order to keep that.
Right.
Our dreaming stories are all about these bastards and what you do with them. Anyway, have a look at some of them. Some of the ones that aren't the like Rudyard Kipling bloody children's storybook versions of our dreaming stories, and you'll see that most of them are about adapting to change and dealing with ourselves.
And from just the small amount that I have been exposed to in that topic, there was a strong system to keep those assholes accountable for what they're doing, right? And so that kind of almost reduced. The assholes are still going to always be there, but they reduced their capacity to really do a lot of big damage because it kept them
exactly
like,
well, because it's everybody's job. There's not some regulatory authority that, you know, everybody can be, you know. So if you've just got one authority, then people can just put out wrong story about that authority and undermine it. No. Totally. If it's everybody's fucking job, you can't put out wrong story of, oh, it's all of us, we're all fucked, we should die. That doesn't work, you know. So everybody's responsible for policing that. Everybody's responsible for slapping down an asshole before they even become an asshole. Like, you shouldn't even have that. That's why we have shame. That's why you shame people. If somebody, like, you know, jumps higher than anyone else and then going, hey, look at me, look how high I jumped, and everyone goes, nah, that was shit. Shame. You think you're somebody. You know, we rip them down. Now, arguably, Australians are taking that on board with the tall poppy syndrome. And, you know, although it's used for shitty reasons now, which is mostly just mobbing people online, from what I can hear. It's like, no, that one, you can redeploy that for something useful. And, you know, here's the thing, though, that once the person's punished, that's it. It's finished. They're not forever, you know. They're not forever bloody excluded.
There's no criminal record.
But they usually left with that responsibility then of carrying that law. You know, all of the punished people in our old stories, they become landforms that hold that story and hold that law for all time, you know. So, they're not hated and reviled people. Our assholes. We love our assholes. The same way that we love our neurodivergent kids. So it comes back to that carer responsibility. You are responsible for an asshole because really that's somebody who's gone wrong in their head. That's somebody who has a divergence. That's somebody who needs and deserves care and love and support. And some of that care might involve slapping someone in the head a bit, or with a bloody stick, or they might even need a bit of a spear through the shoulder or their leg or something like that, just to give them enough of a shock to sort them out. So anyway, how do we get there? Well, I guess so. This thing I've been carving now, and this is an audio thing, so you're not going to be able to see it, but that's where it's up to at the moment. It's had many forms in the last few weeks. It's a so how do you describe it even? It's just, wow, there's a lot of things there that are around this evolutionary stuff. It's a tiny little club that's made out of the same species of tree that was used to smoke my son, that yuk tree. It's incredibly heavy, and you can see the shine on it.
It's gorgeous color.
Where I've weirdly ended up going with it is jellyfish story there.
Wow.
You can see that's a jellyfish on there. And then the handle recalls a lot of weird stuff. For me, it evokes fossil. It evokes lower intestine, gut, all of these things, you know. Some people probably look at this and think it's a sex toy. Something too. Hey, and that's all right. That can come into the story. We have like disgusting sex stuff in our dreaming stories. Like the versions you hear are the kids' versions. All of the important knowledge is always attached in story. You know, if story is used as a mnemonic to remember important knowledge, it's always attached to like sex or violence or something fucking disgusting, because that's really hard to forget that.
That's right.
So you link it mnemonically to those things and you never forget it. So how do we create those stories? Co-create them so that we're not designing them so it's not some singular genius, you know, because that's what wrong story is. It's something that's created unilaterally. But if you're having something that's developing over time collectively, you know, from people who are embedded meaningfully, responsively in the landscape, that's right story coming out there. And that gives you a methodology for design and what we call co-design. But we call it in our lab, we call it a co-design with a K rather than a C, you know, because C, like co-design, co-management, that usually just means, you know, settlers are running things and we're there for the photos.
Yeah. I just thought of something that's related to, you know, some of the circles that I'm in, of, you know, running different events that get people outside, but then still that kind of dynamic happens where there's a few people at the top that everyone starts being like, wow, like you guys are doing this thing and looking up to you, and it automatically creates that. It's like, how do you stop that dynamic being created? Like it's very I feel like it's very difficult.
That's just it.
Yeah.
It is very difficult because there's always assholes. And how do you, the real question is, how do you kickstart a symbiosis?
Yeah.
Well, assholes have a place. Like, they're in creation for a reason.
Yes.
They're there to actually mess things up because things need to be disrupted from time to time. You need pattern breakers as much as you need pattern makers.
For sure.
Because otherwise, if your pattern keeps replicating exactly the same way for too long, it stagnates and everything dies, you know. So you need those pattern breakers, you know. That's why we revere our assholes at the same time as we all, that's our job. We're supposed to have regulatory feedback loops for these bloody people.
Yes.
So, you know, but things change. There are phase shifts. There are dramatic phase shifts. And, you know, sometimes there are, you know, problems arise within systems that you as a custodial species can manage your way through. And you can, you know, you can actually minimize the damage of those things. You can, for example, go, well, cane toads are here now. How do we integrate them into, how do we integrate cane toads into this, you know, ecosystem, which is what Aboriginal people in Southeast Queensland did 100 years ago.
Wow.
When cane toads first came, and you know, we realized we weren't going to be able to eradicate them.
Yeah.
So we didn't. We actually came into relation with them, and there was ceremony for them. They became totem for different people. So people had responsibility for caring for them, and they had to connect with Crow people, you know, who had to do ceremony for, you know, the crows knowing how to flip the cane toads over and eat their guts so that the poison didn't kill them. Goanna people had to do the same, you know, and then, you know, people, different species managing water holes. So anyone who's yabby or ant or anything like that, waterways, then also had to come into relation with that cane toad to make sure that the poison and the rotting corpses of them when they did were not going to compromise the health of the river system, etc., etc. So basically, how do you kickstart a symbiosis? How do you, if you are, you know, in a very unbalanced system where you have multiple assholes in your social group we're disrupting things, and you're trying to do something, you're trying to make an intentional community, and permaculture is part of it, but then, you know, your permaculturalists are also intense misogynists who, you know, really just have this fantasy of having a harem and being like some kind of Captain Caveman with 12 wives, you know, and so they're like sexually assaulting people. They're like propagating a whole heap of public health misinformation online. You know, they're doing horrendous stuff. They're, you know, just basically wielding something like as good as something like homeschooling, for example, you know, wielding that as a as something that they can weaponize, you know, within the community, and beyond it, even, you know, as a way to undermine everybody else's education, which arguably also needs to be as good as it can possibly be in the context. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you've got people like that who are just so inimical to any kind of community health, and even wider community health, and so radicalized that they can see no way to actually be in relation with the people who are living, you know, because they must, within the wider industrial civilization, you know, that, you know, they must be in opposition to those people. Otherwise, they cannot be. How do you deal with living with these people? How do you move them? How do you kickstart a symbiosis whereby your assholes are useful? What do you do with a psychopath? You know, wow, you know, that's difficult.
Massively.
Me and a friend of mine were trying to figure that out. How do we discharge our carer responsibilities for a psychopath that we identify when we have a you know, an intentional community? What we don't want to do is banish them.
Yeah.
Because we saw how that happened with the medieval experiments of the same thing, where they ended up with roving gangs of bandits. And so travel between communities for trade then became problematic and highly risky. And then, you know, you had to end up having a standing fighting force for every single bloody village, which is really hard to fucking maintain. So you do not want to get rid of your psychopaths. It's your job to look after their psychopath. Now, that person's not going to get better. But you know what? Somebody's got to slaughter the goats in your community. And why not that be the person who can do that and get it on his shoes and just not even be bothered about it? How about, you know, the person who's not going to be harmed in their soul by, you know, knocking the rabbits on the head that need to be knocked on the head every day? How about that's that person? And then that person is then a valued member of the society, and their divergence is valued, even though it's like something that we find abhorrent. It's like, yeah, well, there are some abhorrent things that need to happen in this world, and that guy can do them. And you know what? He might be a psycho, but he's our fucking psycho. And you know what else? If someone else banishes their psycho and that one starts prowling around the outside of the town, I know who we're going to send to take care of that bastard. You know, we're going to send the guy who's going to be able to do that without, you know, etc. Really... So that this, you know, it's all these things. There's got to be room for everybody. But how do you kickstart a symbiosis whereby that is not going to end up inviting trouble, where that's not going to result in, you know, man, because you look at the problem with intentional communities, most of them are religious ones. And most religions are set up to make a powerful cabal of males at the center unaccountable for their worst excesses. Basically, that's it. Even the good ones. You know, like I really like Jehovah's Witnesses have their shit together with a lot of their ideas. But in the end, it's just the structure of being a religion that separates itself from the outside world.
Well, that's right.
That calls, if you have a religion, you call the rest, if you call things, the rest of the world, worldly, and that's separate from you, and that you're somehow, you know, morally and in every other way separate from that, then you're creating a system whereby, like, yes, you're going to make some really good, beautiful people in there, but there's also going to be a few assholes. It's a system where people can commit crimes, the most horrendous crimes against the defenseless people in there, who are your women and children, and they will never be held accountable for it. You know, that, you know, oh no, but no, they'll go to the Council of Bloody Elders,
right?
You know, and it's like, well, that Council of Elders then says, well, you know, then it's really important that Susan needs to, you know, practice forgiveness, because that's what it says in the Bible, and forgive this guy, and they need to spend more time together, and, you know, we'll get them to pray together every night unsupervised, and that's how we're going to resolve this situation. No fucking thanks. You know, this is, if you are, I don't know, if you're trying to drop out in any way, usually that's coming from a motivation of wrong story.
Yeah.
And even if it's coming from some misguided sense of right story, and you're going in with the best of intentions, you're still setting up a self-terminating algorithm in your community. Somebody gonna, you're setting it up so that the arseholes will end up being in charge, and the arseholes will be unaccountable. So the only thing, you need an ecosystem of, interdependent, nodes and symbioses going on that are, whereby every glitch is, also like a feature, amazing. It all just fits together like an ecosystem, and it's constantly evolving as well to respond to changes in the economy. And I mean the external fucking economy from if you're just running on an internal economy, that shit's going to fall apart. You need to be connected, networked out into the world. You need to have supply chains, because no system can be an island. You need to exist within open feedback loops with the rest of the world. Yeah, because you're going to need places to dump stuff.
Yeah.
And places where that's going to be wanted and needed, what you need to dump. And you're also going to want to take on somebody else's stuff. That you just don't have in yours, because otherwise your system will stagnate. So how do you do that? How do you kickstart symbiosis? That's the whole question. Any question you ask, like, how do we manage ourselves, etc. Oh, we just have zero tolerance for anybody who, assaults somebody or whatever. And it's like, well, so what does that look like? How do you yeah, how do you reform that person, but also without, like, you're just making that person unaccountable, making yourself unaccountable.
So it's like, how do you support that person to grow and move forward?
And how do you make sure there's justice for the person that's been wronged, or that person at least has enough agency in the process of justice that they can walk away from it with their head held high, and that they can make sense of it, and their families can make sense of it with them, and all of their connections, the whole community can make sense of what's happened, in a way that works.
That's huge.
That is huge.
It's like,
how do you do it? Yeah. Well, you can't, basically, in the end, you can't be radical. You can't be radical in the sense of being radicalized. You can't be radical in the sense of being, separate from the powers that be. You have to acknowledge that the powers that be are part of your context, and that you have to be responsive to your entire context, even the bits that you disagree with and don't like. So for me, I don't like the idea of not being able to knock emus anymore. I don't like the idea that, emus will become the size of plains turkeys, and that plains turkeys will become the size of bush turkeys, and the bush turkeys will become the size of the smaller ones, the little chocolong. All these things that things will have in size on our continent. They might do differently elsewhere, but in a lot of places on our continent, that'll be potentially, dwarfism will be the thing. So me thinking about that, me thinking about how many people are unhoused and how that's exponentially increasing all the time. That there are more people unhoused than we know, because a lot of us are just fucking couch surfing.
Yeah.
A lot of us are just staying with relatives in overstuffed bloody houses. Yeah. And so we're not counted as homeless, but those numbers are increasing all the time. There are tent cities popping up and having to be bloody demolished and moved all the time. There are all these things going on. There are landscapes where people aren't embedded in the land. They're not able to move with the land seasonally. Like, you might need to go further up the ridge in winter, because that's where it's warmer, and that's where you have some shelter from the wind, and that's where the foods that are best eaten in winter are to be found or grown in that terrain. And then as the seasons shift, there might be a few camps on this big bioregion where your village should be situated, and so maybe your village needs to be mobile. There are itinerant populations, and there will be more and more itinerant populations as climate changes, and we have climate refugees coming in from overseas, but also we have climate refugees within our own country, within our own continent, I mean. So we have people like there are still people in Lismore unhoused.
Yeah.
And everyone's forgotten about those floods because there's been 10 other bloody things since then. There are people in Victoria who are still unhoused from bushfires.
Yes.
So where do they go? These people are all forgotten and itinerant, and they're just moving around and they're living from week to week trying to survive. This is happening everywhere. Where do these communities go?
That's right.
How does your community evolve to be something that can take people in and that can replicate the structure of a decent, co-designed way of being, that can replicate that enough to be able to split once you reach a certain size and then move into more territories and then be able to move around those territories, but also move on when the superstorms and bulldozers and drones come to move you on, because that will happen, something that will also always happens when scarcity increases in industrial systems, as we've seen, and also in empires. Traditionally for the last 10,000 years, we keep seeing the same thing over and over, is that autocracy increases, and the desire to expand, hold more lands and control more peoples, that increases with scarcity, and ironically with the efficiency of energy systems, which should give you enough abundance to just chill, but no, you need more. So you look at all these trends, you look at all these catastrophic risks, and you go, okay, as always, the assholes are force multipliers for every catastrophic risk scenario. They're force multipliers for every item of risk. So, they're all married together. There's a symbiosis and wrong story that's really powerful. How together do we create right story and actually, create just these incredibly resilient and constantly changing and morphing supply chains, between mobile itinerant communities,
right,
who, are not people who've just, they have a trust fund so they can say, fuck it. I'm going to drop out and fucking tune into something else. It's like, good on you, Susan, but step back here.
Yeah.
Let's not call her Susan. That's misogynistic. Let's call her Gregory. Yeah. Step back, Gregory. You're needed, but not in the way that you think. There's a lot of ferals who are incredibly, indolent and, are not there from any, and in ways that they're responding to any kind of pressure in the world, except for a vague sense that their privilege is being lost. We're all losing power and privilege, every single person on this planet. Those of us who don't have much, we tend to not get too bitchy about it. And we tend to try and respond to the reality more. Tend to, but not always. Sometimes we start lashing out laterally or trying to kick down to whoever may be beneath us. Yeah, a lot of us underclass dudes, fellas, tend to do that. Yeah. Anyway, so how do we do all this? And this is what this is about. And that's why I've got this jellyfish fossil, in
jellyfish are pretty ancient.
Little law stick. And you see the size of this law stick? It's not much bigger than my head. It's very small. Normally I make them like heaps bigger. They're big. But I'm like, no, these will have to be smaller. The weapons will have to be smaller. And so there's also in a series of tiny boomerangs I've been making.
Wow.
Because I'm imagining, okay, so yeah, what are the new projectile weapons we're going to need as Aboriginal people when we're hunting in that old way, especially when, with rising autocracy, definitely, there's going to be fewer firearms. There's going to be less access to things like ammunition, etc. These will be probably more expensive than food will be, so you won't want to use that in your hunting. So what kind of projectile weapons will you need, And so I'm scaling down traditional ones and seeing how they go as small things. And going, all right, so this thing that would normally knock an emu, could I knock a possum with it? At a different scale.
Wow.
Yeah. And I don't know, or a really large edible cane toad, because you never know what we're going to be eating. And I'm imagining myself as a person who really struggles with our bipolar meds, moving
Mhm.
across in a landscape with a large, very, very strong, going on his physiology now as a 6-year-old, he will be stronger than most men. And he has tantrums, and he's quite non-verbal, except he can do movie quotes, or quote from books and stuff like that, but he doesn't really talk to you. What's our life going to be like? What's it going to be like being itinerant, with a 20-year-old kid when I'm 60 something? And, I'm still I'm the only one who has to be able to fight him when he loses his temper and stop him from hurting other people. What's that going to be like, moving around those landscapes as my moods, go from manic and, insane, with lots of amazing ideas, pretty much how I've been talking this whole interview, except heaps faster and with more motherfuckers thrown in. Between that and complete despair and not being able to get up in the morning, what's it going to be like, him and I moving around in a landscape? And so I start telling that story, and, using that mad studies methodology and Indigenous methodologies, as a kind of predictive technology, to
Wow.
imagine what the climate will be like, but also what all of these alternative communities will be like, because most communities will be people, every town will be different. There'll be people responding in different ways.
Yeah.
There'll be different dominant ideologies in those places that will have taken over. Some of them will be, religious militias, where it won't be a very nice place to be female or a child or divergent in any way, or overweight or heaps of different things. There'll be
Like,
communities where if you don't want to do the compulsory yoga session every day, you're going to have trouble fitting in, So I'm imagining and writing a story and telling stories and carving stories about my son and I moving through that landscape.
wow.
A place where, if we want meat, which a lot of communities won't eat meat because it'll be sort of seen as something that's anathema. Of course it will be, because of the industrial scale of protein, when and where that's gone. There'll be a lot of communities where you want. So we're going to be sneaking out and bloody hunting all these tiny animals, so that my massive son's going to be able to get enough protein to keep his frame going.
And with that, I'm just really intrigued because I feel like thinking about the future, that's something that modern humans, we're not very good at that. And do you think that was like really embedded in Indigenous?
Yeah, no, but I think I disagree with that thesis. I've heard it a lot.
Yeah.
Yuval Noah Harari, all these, all your theorists talk about, humans, are not very good at responding to things that are going to happen in the future. It's what it is to be human, is to be constantly fucking worried about the future, especially
Yeah.
modern humans.
Yeah.
I think it pretty much characterizes what it is to be an industrial human being, is to be in a constant sense of anxiety about the future.
Right. Yeah.
What school will my kids go to?
Right.
Will my kids be able to go to school? Where are we gonna, where are we gonna eat? Am I gonna get that promotion? Am I gonna be better than the people next door? When are we going to have more money? When are we going to have another car? People are obsessed with the freaking future.
Yeah.
They just, I don't know. In the old days, people just had more of a deep time focus going in either direction, because you're constantly present with both your ancestors and your descendants, because that's who you are as a custodian. It's somebody who cares for everything in this moment, in this constantly moving moment. You're the carer for everything, in terms of everything that belongs to your ancestors and descendants simultaneously. And you're looking after that in that moment.
Right. And I feel like in this modern time, it's almost like life gets so busy that humans don't have the time to be able to tend to, that anxiety of the future. And I think that's a big part of it.
And there's deep time rigor that is supposed to be applied as part of your methodology. And this is why Indigenous methodologies are important. There's deep time rigor that needs to be applied, to the development of every innovation, to all design. You need to be accompanying it, like built into your design as an affordance needs to be regulatory feedback loops, needs to be limits to, whatever your invention is, just eating your society and the land alive. I like to use as an example, my mom, Western Cape York, we use like sawfish blades as big swords for like, spectacular battles when it comes down to, I'm going to have to kill this bastard, big spectacular battles. He's got one too, though, is the only problem. But built into that, you'll notice as an affordance of the weapon that it only has a tiny fucking handle. It's a very small handle. And this is what prevents it from being something that will end up killing everybody in the region in a short time, that will end up, that will result in, imperialisms being done, invasions being done, that will result in wars happening instead of just fights. That's why you have a 3-inch handle on this massive, heavy, deadly blade. So it's so that you can have spectacular battles, but you haven't got this, deadly efficiency of this huge thing being able to cut a man in half, and then without thinking of it, like turn to the next man and start cutting him in half too. We don't like having WMDs. So all of our most deadly weapons have limitations built into them. And this is what I mean by deep time diligence in design. And so that's why, I don't get to just, just start talking about the future. I have to do months and months and years of going through and making many of these tiny weapons and thinking about dwarfism. That's just exploring the idea of species dwarfism as well. It might not go that way, because I might not end up, I might arrive at the point where I'm like, oh, hang on. Because weirdly, jellyfish, I didn't start with jellyfish when I started this thing, but so now I have to look at jellyfish story, and I have to look at the jellyfish fossils that are like in the desert inland, and then consider that as well. And then that makes me think about rising sea levels. And that makes me think about, the things that survive. It makes me think about the small stingers, and how they, how they move differently. In response to the big ones. It also makes me think about, this idea that, black people don't get stung by jellyfish. And what's interesting there is, like, dark-skinned people. It's not just there's a couple of things about that kind of make it true, and that's one, we always know where the stingers are. If you're Indigenous and you have Indigenous knowledge, you're in an Indigenous family, just don't get stung because you're not swimming at that place. But it's also, if you happen to have really black skin, that's what jellyfish can see, is dark shapes. They don't see light things very well. So but then that's really interesting, because then you're thinking about, wow, it's kind of like the opposite of industrial photography technology, which has trouble seeing dark because it's been designed to photograph the faces of fair people, and that all of that has come through, and in the technology right through to facial recognition software. Wow, what if you based your facial recognition software on jellyfish? And then you've got to think, so how much do I interact with this technology in my process of designing these symbioses? The technology is certainly part of my reality right now. Do I ignore it and, try to be traditional and authentic and like not use any technology? Or do I use the shit out of it and like promote its use and like, hasten the bloody heat death of the universe? Which way do we go? All of these things you consider. It's too much. It's a lot, hey?
It's a lot. And I feel like what you were saying before, it's just about, I think the word balance is it's a term that's thrown around way too frequently, but I always come back to that, like living, because my partner and I live out in the bush, which is an hour away from here on the Central Coast, and the only thing that keeps me half sane is being able to go and fill my cup out there, so that I can come back in here, because I was very like, nah, I'm just going to boycott society, see you later. But now everything that you've just been talking about has been a really common theme in my world in the last few months. It's like, we have to integrate, we have to bridge the gap, it's the way, really. Whatever that looks like, I don't know, but yeah.
I know, you leave for the hate, you stay for the love. Weirdly, but staying sort of makes you so complicit in wrecking everything. It's like you have to be, but then how else do I change things? But then you know, all the hippies thought they changed the system from within, and then they just became the neoliberal bloody overlords, and that actually wrecked everything worse than it ever could have been wrecked. Goddamn hippies, you know. I don't want to be that. It's I ended up entering the city in 2016. It was the first ever mobile phone I owned.
Wow.
You know, I came into the city and I had to have a mobile phone just to exist in the city. Hated it, hated what it did to my brain, hated everything about the city, still hate it. Trying to love it, because I moved here for love.
Yes.
And me hating my place poisons my relationship with the woman I moved here for.
Wow.
The woman I love, you know, it poisons our relationship, how much I hate this place. And then she's got to sit there and watch me just slowly falling apart and being destroyed, you know, and moved away from what she fell in love with in the first place, which was somebody who's ostensibly wild, etc. But you know, I was wild and I was able to live on bush medicine because I was in the bush. I could live on bush tucker because I was in the bush. I can't live on these things here, and most of the people in the world live here. 7 million people in this city here, and that's like a third of all the people on this continent. When this place goes, oh my goodness, you know. But they can't live on bush tucker. They can't. There's too many people. There's not enough bush. You know, my way, is it the right way? No. The right way is going to be what's going to be the right way for all the people. You know, as we move through the next couple of generations. So my way is the wrong way now, which really sucks, because I like it and it should be right. But that's a logical fallacy, because it's based on the idea that tradition is right. And nature is right. But you can't just assume that those things are true. Oh my God, that really hurts. So, you know, and there's old Latin names for those fallacies. It's been around that long, you know, ad antiquitatem. It's like, you know, tradition is right. That's the name of that fallacy, you know, and ad naturam. So they're both argumentum ad antiquitatem, argumentum ad naturam. There's been, you know, they were Greek names for that before the Romans even renamed them. You know, Aristotle, you know, invented the study of fallacies, and those two bastards were in there. You know, this appeal to nature and appeal to tradition, that doesn't mean it's true. And that's really hard. My whole existence is around struggling with the lie of the wrong story that's in my heart and in my entire every cell of my body, telling me that, you know, what actually is the right way, which is, you know, in a lot of ways looks like assimilation, is actually the right way. And I'm but, you know, that's only the window dressing. You know, actually being in our traditions of adaptation and of co-design, you know, with your true environment and your true context, responding collectively to that in your groups, that's the real culture. And I need to be living that, not just living what would look good if someone came in and filmed me for their YouTube channel.
Wow.
That's what's hard. Because you perform what you think is authentic just for yourself.
Well, and it's hard.
You do it too.
I know.
We all do.
It's hard because that is what you know that the world is expecting. So it's like, okay, we have to, it's like breaking that story of putting on that best act for what we think people want us to be or talk like or look like. And that is hard.
That is freaking hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, oh, thank you so much, Tyson. I have no idea how long we'll be going for, but it's probably
It's
time to
proper
wrap it up.
long form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really, really appreciate you coming on, taking the time, even though it took a while to get the technology going on my side. But
No worries. Well,
yeah,
so it's a beautiful yarn, and we met in a beautiful way at the Laura Quinkin Festival.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and alongside all my family, all there, and
yeah,
all that law, all those dances. You
yeah.
saw all those uplifts dances, and um, you know, you got to see all my family and everything there, and I don't know, made me happy.
It was really special.
Just being with everyone for a minute,
Yeah,
and then yeah, noticing how many of my ailments disappeared.
yeah.
But then which ones got worse, like my horrendous back. Yeah.
Mm,
And there we are, just dancing in that spaces in between together.
yeah,
That's where it all happens, all the good stuff, eh?
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
that's
right,
it.
sis.
Thanks
Catch
so
ya.
much,
No
Tyson.
worries.